Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Amy Goldman. I'm joined today by Brianne Forbes, Stefan Gary, and James Stegan. And this work is supported by the, someone's not muted. Please mute yourselves if you can. This work is supported by the Department of Energy, Office of Science, Office of Biological and Environmental Research, Environmental System Science Program, and also in part by the DOE Small Business Innovation Research Program. And we are so grateful to have you all here today. We're going to spend the first part of today giving an update on this ICON-ModEx study that's been going on now for over a year, and many of you on the call have been engaged with that, collecting samples, and this would literally be impossible without you, both providing feedback and also collecting samples, and we're so grateful and so excited to be talking with you all. And during the second part of the call, we'll get into more discussion with all of you. So please hold your questions until the end of the slides, and then we'll pause for questions and then sort of get into some feedback questions we have for all of you as well. So to jump into things, the work that we're discussing today and the reason that we're discussing it today is because we are following a set of design principles to guide this work, and this work is based on those principles. So James, if you can go to the next slide. So WHONDRS uses ICON science principles, and that stands for Integrated, Coordinated, Open, and Networked. And ICON is a framework to guide the intentional design of any project motivated by the pursuit of mutual benefit and transferable knowledge. So if those are values that are important to you, if you find those to be motivating to your work, I really encourage you to consider using those in your work. I'll mention a little bit more about that in a moment. But if you can go to the next slide, James, just want to go really briefly over what these words mean. Everyone defines these words differently. So what ICON means to us as we apply it, so we're talking about science that is done in an intentional way from the beginning. So intentionally, it is integrated across disciplines and scales. It is coordinated with consistent protocols and methods to enable transferability. It is open and also fair throughout the entire research lifecycle from ideation to publication. And it's also networked with stakeholders for mutual benefit. And so that's part of why we're talking with you today. It's part of why we had calls like this early on in the study design process to get feedback on how we were actually implementing the study. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you value, and we want to make changes in alignment with that. So if you go to the next slide, James. Just really briefly, if you're interested in ICON Science and if this is new to you, there is this entity called the ICON Science Cooperative. James and I co-lead this with Sujata Imani, and this was developed to help people do ICON Science. We were hearing from people that they were really interested in this and they wanted tools, they wanted help making this happen for them in their work. And that's what the cooperative is designed to do. So this can help people really at any stage of their project, proposal, existing project, can help with implementation, and also there are chances for kind of visiting students, postdocs, faculty for mutual learning. So if that's of interest to you, if you think ICON can be valuable to your work, or if you're just interested in how we're implementing this ICON-ModEx project as we talk more about it, please reach out. Email address is just icons@pnnl.gov, easy to remember. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to James to talk a little bit more about what this actual particular study is. And yeah, thank you all.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks a lot, Amy, for getting us going. And thanks again for everyone for joining and participating. So as Amy said, I'm going to just talk now about our application of those principles in the context of river corridor science in this, what we call this ICON-ModEx campaign. We'll describe what ModEx means very shortly. But the very short science motivation here is that if you think about rivers, you think about the sediments, and within those sediments is a place called the hyporeic zone. That part of the river systems contribute anywhere from 3 to 99% of the respiration going on in the river system itself. Um, wildly a broad range of variation there. And we don't currently have a model to help us predict or understand that variability across diverse river systems. And so a goal here is to generate knowledge that is transferable across diverse river systems so we may understand mechanistically and be able to predict sediment, hyporeic zone respiration rates across global rivers, but starting here within the US. So that's our science motivation. And Amy mentioned the WHONDRS consortium, and this is a key part of how we're doing this. We're generating data across very diverse river systems with you all in this crowdsourcing effort. And it's really, as it says, enabled by the scientific community. Thank you again. And WHONDRS is really based on trying to understand river corridor hydrology, biogeochemistry, microbiology broadly, but also very much aligning again with those ICON principles to find ways that those science outcomes are beneficial beyond just this project, that are beneficial to the community. So building a resource for and by the community. And so how is this project really working? I'm going to keep it a little bit high level, but this ICON-ModEx campaign, as I noted, is about understanding and predicting sediment respiration across rivers. So how are we doing this? Well, we're starting with open access data. So in 2019, WHONDRS had a crowdsourced sampling campaign across the US and also some global locations. And probably many of you contributed to that, thank you. And that generated open data. And those open data on sediment respiration and a variety of other parameters. And our collaborator, Stefan Gary, who you'll hear from shortly, at Parallel Works, took those data and built machine learning models as a first cut, asking the question, can we actually use those data to start to predict sediment respiration across rivers? And then taking those models to turn it into artificial intelligence in terms of using the models to guide us to where we need to go get additional data, additional samples. And so this is this ModEx idea of model, experiment, iteration, and cycling, iterative cycling. And so what's happening is there's the machine learning models that are being built at this point every month, and we use those to guide us to new locations. And as we move around the wheel here to the right, then we ask collaborators to help collect samples from across the contiguous US. We send out a very standardized sampling kit. Bree will talk about that. And the samples are collected, they come back to us, we generate new data very quickly. And those data are then used to evaluate and then rebuild the machine learning models every month. So every month we go through this cycle. And then we can start to ask questions of, are we improving? Where do we need to go next? And you'll see some details of that. And so this is why we call it ICON-ModEx, because we're combining ICON principles with this ModEx paradigm as well. And I'm going to hand this off to Bree to tell you a little bit about how that actually works.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to describe how we actually do this in practice. So to understand this, I'm going to walk you through the scheduling process that we go through. So let's say today you come to me, you let me know I'm interested in being involved in this project. So on June 9th, that's the little person, you're the person in this calendar. Next slide, James. So we would be using the June map that was generated at the end of May, and the data that was fed to this model was all of the data from May and earlier. Next slide. With this June map, we're scheduling sampling 2 months out. So we create the map at the beginning of June, and throughout all of June, we're using this map to schedule sampling in August. Also during the communication, you would use the map and a scheduling sheet to select a site and a sampling date. And this is also when we discuss the consent form, shipping address, protocols, and any other questions that may arise. Next. We schedule sampling on a Monday and we ship the kit to you 2 weeks in advance of the sampling date. After sampling, you'll ship the kit back to P&L the following Tuesday, so the next day after sampling, so that we can carry out time-sensitive lab analyses. Next slide. So here is an example of those standardized kits that James mentioned earlier. In the top left, you can see the kits. On the right, you can see some lab folks analyzing these kits. Top right, you can see the materials that go within the kits. They have standardized labeling. Bottom left, you see standardized metadata. And then you can see some differences in sediments from across the United States that we're seeing and collecting. And next. So finally, all relevant data from August and earlier, including the data you collected, are used to test and rebuild the model, and then the cycle continues. But this example is just for one person, one kit, one site. In reality, if we go to the next slide, this is how the calendar actually looks like. So there's pretty much constant communication and logistics. Shipping supplies from P&L typically occurs every Monday. Data collection occurs every Monday as well, and shipping the sample back to P&L happens the next day. At the end of every month, we're compiling the new data, updating the model, and creating a new map, and then the cycle continues on and on and on. And with that, I'll hand it over to Stefan.
Thank you, Bree. So my role in this project is with the machine learning. And so I wanted, as James mentioned at the beginning, the scientific goal is to predict the respiration rate in sediments. And we're using a machine learning model to do this using the data that's been collected at the lab, as Bree just described. And I chose to show this plot as an update on the progress because it shows the accuracy or the score of the machine learning models as we've added more and more data points to the data set. So the x-axis along the horizontal shows the number of samples and data points that we have. The y-axis is the score or the accuracy of the model. And so as we've added more data points, the model accuracy is increasing over time. I'm not going to go into the details of the exact model, but I'd be happy to go describe that later. But some key points that I'd like to bring out is that this whole process is automated. So when the new data is available, Bree sends that data to a public repository, and that action triggers this automated machine learning pipeline, starts up computers in the cloud, runs the training, and then all the results from the training go back to this public repository for all stakeholders to see. And that automation process is really helpful. In particular, you can see those points in the upper right corner. We're getting really good model scores, and that's because we've just implemented a new normalization of the data. And so this automation allows us to test a new approach to viewing the data in a very quick way, so we can get quick feedback that will ultimately help with the learning process. And then we can also then take that new approach and we can then hindcast it and sort of reevaluate the values that we have in the past with this new approach. So I haven't done that yet. I guess that's all I wanted to say here. Aside from some future work with the machine learning model would be assessing like which of the input variables are the most important, but that's future work. So James, thank you. Yeah, please switch to the next slide. So to kind of bring it home and make it real, this slide is an animation stepping through the date of the machine learning model that's in the bottom left corner. So that's the sort of the first model started in early 2022, and now we're stepping through each month. And these sites here are the sites that are predicted to have sort of the most relevance to improving the machine learning are shown in one color, and then other sites that are really important for, say, validating those predictions are in another color. And for the most part, the map, there's a lot of, some of the points shift around in the map, but the key point is that in the most recent months, we seem to see a sort of a stabilization over time, where there are certain areas, like say along the Mississippi River, where really kind of they're continuously having the same color of points in that area. That's all I wanted to say here. I think it's going to James next.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I'll just briefly add the map that Bree mentioned is the map that Stefan was just speaking to. And those dots are where we reach out to folks and like, hey, could you help sample here or here or here? And round we go, as Stefan was mentioning. So everything we've been talking about, in terms of modeling at least, has been focused on machine learning and AI, which is essentially black box with respect to process understanding or mechanistic understanding. And something we did in our initial 2 community calls before we started actually generating data and sending out kits is we asked people, like you all, what are the other data types that are really going to be valuable for this particular science, for this particular project, but also what could be valuable to others beyond this project? What's valuable to the community? And we iterated on that a couple of times. And we made changes to our protocols and some of the details of the data types that we're generating. And some data types are very quick to generate. So like the respiration rates, we get those just like 2 days after receiving the kit, and then go right back into the machine learning model. Other data types, as you may expect, can take a very long time to generate. And so just wanted to go through this kind of quickly just to give you a sense of what's the broader suite of data types that are being generated for all the locations that are being sampled. And so these are data types that can be paired with the respiration data and can also be integrated into the machine learning models to ask questions such as, if we're doing really well with the machine learning models, which are currently based on just a few pieces of information, such as the water temperature and the pH of the water and the oxygen concentration in the water, not the sediments themselves, just in the water. The XY coordinates, which can be used to pull sort of geospatial variables. But at this point, we're not putting in any detailed molecular properties of the sediments to try to predict sediment respiration. And as you could see from what Stefan was presenting, the model performance is getting pretty good, at least in my view. We're getting close to 55 or almost 60% of variation explained across the entire contiguous US with just those very simple inputs. But then we can start to ask the question of, okay, are the molecular details really important to enable predictive capacity? Well, how do we do that? We actually have to generate the molecular data to be able to ask that question. So there's a variety of data types here that we're generating in the spirit of that kind of a question of how much power, explanatory power, can we achieve by including different types of molecular data? And in turn, can that point us towards key mechanisms that we need to understand? And so here on the left-hand side is a list of just some of the key data types. So we've got dissolved organic carbon, total nitrogen, major ions, FTICR, some of you may know it. If not, that's a ultra high resolution approach using mass spectrometry to characterize the organic matter within the sample. And then also some basic parameters like dissolved oxygen and temperature. And the little stars there's a note there at the bottom. The data that were collected this year in April or earlier, those are already public. We publish our data on a data archive called ESS Dive. Bree, maybe if you have a moment, maybe you could even drop the link to the data package in the chat for folks. And this is a key tenet, going back to what Amy was referring to, of ICON science, of making sure we're doing the best we can to give back. People go to the field, spend their own time helping collect samples. And one thing we can do at least is to make the data available as quickly as possible to folks. So that's a data package that just went into the chat in which we're doing that. And so we have some timelines here for some of these types of data, such as the FTICR. We have to wait until we have all the samples and then run them in batch. That's kind of a technical constraint. And sorry, I just realized I didn't go over the sediment data types, but we'll kind of follow along there. So thinking about FTICR, but also liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. This is a nice complement to FTICR. It can target kind of a different mass range of molecules It can also be used in a little bit more of a quantitative way. Sediment mineralogy, both carbon and nitrogen, grain size, iron 2, ATP is a proxy of microbial biomass, active microbial biomass, and sequencing data for the microbes, as well as grain size photos to give a physical context. And this is, if you look across these data types, this is, again, thinking about ICON, the first letter is integrated and trying to be inclusive in terms of different biological, chemical, and physical components of the system. So don't just do the biogeochemistry, or just, don't just do the microbiology, but try to do this all together. So to pursue inclusive, holistic, mechanistic understanding and predictive capacity. So those are some other data types that will be coming, and I want to give a shout out to the WHONDRS Consortium, which again includes many of you, taking beautiful photos of the places where samples are coming from. I'm always amazed to see those. Just so cool to see like the range of systems that are being studied, which goes back to this tenet of driving towards really transferable understanding. Okay, so then we just have a couple slides left. We're going to try to keep about a half hour for discussion. And so be getting your questions ready. We're getting close. One place we're going. So we've been doing this, as Amy mentioned, for about a year or so. And the model's getting better and better, as Stefan was showing. I think what's going to happen, we'll see, but I think what's going to happen is that model performance is going to start to stabilize, such that continuing to get more and more and more samples of the same type may not lead to enhanced model performance at some point. And that's a really useful aspect of doing ModEx, right? We get that monthly immediate feedback, very useful for making practical choices of like, can we stop sampling? Like, let's be efficient. Let's just not generate data to generate data. So if it goes that way, and then we were currently planning on it to go that way and end in October, mid-October, for what we've been describing so far, but keep generating those other molecular data to enable the questions I was just talking about. But where are we going to go past there? Well, most of the sites we've been sampling, that you all have been sampling, are not impacted by major disturbances. I mean, certainly some are, but if you think about wildfire in particular, I think we can all appreciate wildfire these days, with much of the East Coast and parts of Canada being blanketed in smoke. Wildfire is a big deal, and it, of course, is increasing in frequency and severity. And it's an important part of our project at the moment, our broader project from which this ICON-ModEx sits, is to understand impacts of fire on river systems. And so we want to turn the direction of this ICON-ModEx effort towards understanding impacts of fire on river water column respiration rates and sediment respiration rates. And pictured in the upper right is Alison Myers-Pigg. She's leading the development of this new direction to build on this ICON-ModEx base that's been built here. And so just a little bit of more science context, the idea, if you look on the left-hand side, what that is a map of the Yakima River Basin. So this is a basin, it's about 16,000 square kilometers in Washington State. And last year, as part of this ICON-ModEx effort, we collected samples from 45 locations. There's pictured there. Those are the circles on the map. And did the protocol, got the respiration rates. All that data is in the models that Stefan was talking about. And we saw these two outliers, these hot spots, if you will, in the purple. The fastest respiration rates, the fastest oxygen consumption. And those two sites happened to have been burned very shortly before we collected those samples. And so, like, okay, we know fire results in a lot of transport of material into the river corridor, and we're seeing these hotspots show up in this basin that's regional and kind of local to our own physical laboratory. So Anne was thinking, okay, we've built this foundation with ICON-ModEx. How can we put these things together? And so basically the hypothesis that we're going to be testing with this new effort is that fire basically increases the probability of biogeochemical hotspots. at the continental scale. And so we have this distribution of, it's getting close to 500 respiration rates across the nation. And that's such a great background to start to be able to compare fire impacted respiration rates to this kind of like non-disturbed context. And so, yeah, this next fiscal year, we're going to turn directions and start to head that way. We'll be doing it everything's going to stay the same. The kits are going to stay the same. All the methods are going to stay the same to enable interoperability, which is really, of course, quite critical, and continue to engage you all. And so we're going to have a question for you as we get into a feedback session about this particular piece. So that's kind of where we're a couple directions we're heading, more mechanistic understanding and then moving into fire impacts. And then this is our last kind of presentation slide before we go into a discussion feedback part. And there's a lot of opportunities for folks in the context of this project. And this is, we've really tried to be purposeful about trying to find and create and build opportunities. And so here's just some examples. And this is really for anyone at any career stage, at any kind of institution. So I'd encourage you to think broadly. We can come in and give virtual classroom presentations, for example, on this science and the institutions that are participating. Some folks are very interested and may not know, for example, about national laboratories or industry. So Stefan is in industry, we're on the national lab side, and how that collaboration works. We can talk to students about that and talk about tons of internship opportunities. As I mentioned before, all the data is published openly, quite rapidly, as best we can. And all those data are available to people to write papers, to pursue additional modeling. The Stefan's modeling approaches, as was mentioned, are all open access. And we can help you expand your professional network. Also, in a pretty immediate opportunity, very practical, tangible opportunity, is to join us on June 23rd. I believe that's in 2 weeks, if my math is right. What we're going to be doing is this whole project, as is clear, hopefully at this point, is very much based on a big community of folks coming together. And what we want to do is start to write a manuscript about this work, about the science, about the progress, the results, the data science, the whole thing, but do that collectively and in an open way. So we're going to have a workshop to kick off that open manuscript on June 23rd. That's 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific. And truly all are welcome. Any career stage, any kind of institution, we'd love to have you join us and be part of that scientific process. So the QR code that's on the slide here, that's how you would sign up for that. And I think Bree, yes, has put a link in the chat as well to sign up. And then we'll reach out to you for additional details and like a meeting link and things like that. If you can't make that time, it's okay. Please still reach out. We can still absolutely get you engaged in that effort. And one thing I want to mention, two more things, and I'll stop talking and go into some question time. One thing we've really tried to do is to listen to people about what are the opportunities that people actually value and they actually want to see that can help them in their careers and help with their students, with their own careers, etc. And so the things on the screen are from that listening, where we try to hear people, like what is actually valuable to you. But I'd encourage you to think about that and to give us that feedback, continue to give us that feedback. You know, we're doing the science. I think it's exciting, but also really this idea and this tenet of trying to find mutual benefit is really a very important part of the way that we're doing science and is aligned with the networked part of ICON. And it's so valuable to get your feedback of what you need, like how can we actually provide value back to you. So with that, I'm going to again acknowledge funding from Department of Energy for the SBIR program, as well as the Environmental System Science program. And where we're going to go next is we're going to do a feedback session. So before I show that slide, I just want to take a time out and see if people have any burning questions that they'd like to ask at this point. I'd really encourage you to ask any type of question. If you want to learn a little bit more about machine learning, for example, Stefan's very happy, I'm sure, to lean into that. I asked him a really basic question a couple days ago, like, Stefan, what's a hyperparameter? Like I think a lot of machine learning people know that. I didn't know that. So I love just asking questions like that. So if you people can raise their hand if anyone wants to ask a question, would really appreciate it. I'll give it a 10-second silent crickets countdown. And if I don't hear anything or see anything, then we'll move on. But okay, John, there you go. Thank you. You want to unmute and go for it?
Yeah, thanks, by the way, Brianne, for inviting me to this. This is really, really good stuff. So I have a bunch of questions. I'll start just one this time and I'll wait to see if I can get to the others. But for the machine learning model, I'm curious, what are the primary limitations? Is it, and I think James partly addressed this, but not fully. I mean, it in principle looks like it could be a lack of data, but then the fact that you change your normalization procedure suggests that it's also a lack of physics or other types of factors. And so I'm just wondering, what are the primary limitations, do you think? And what will success look like? And thanks.
That's a great question. Thank you. Just to speak directly to the normalization change, I included that there to show like current cutting edge work that we're doing right now, because what I really want to do is take that change and hindcast it into the past to say, you know, for our earlier experiments, what would have been the machine learning result had we applied that normalization at the time that we had just those data points. And so that way we would have a consistent apples to apples comparison for like two different methods. So it's not something where we're changing a method midstream and then kind of moving forward in sort of in kind of a disjointed sort of way. I really want to ensure that emphasize that the idea is to be continuous and to find the best technique so that we can have that across the whole range of the data points.
And which do you think are the most, what are the limiting factors? Is it data? You just need more data, or do you think you've hit that magic spot? Or
my guess is more data is going to be a good thing, just based on, you know, the overall, you know, consensus among machine learning is that more data is better, and just because there's so many, so many moving parts. But that is a guess. I don't quite know what. I don't know if I mean what we're seeing is we're seeing a bit of a plateau with the learning. So like in the previous slide, I guess that would be slide 15 in our presentation.
Yeah, I saw it. It was very clear. And then there's the jump when you showed the fully normalized. Yeah.
And we could see the same pattern with those normalized data points if I were to project them back in time. But I didn't have time to do that before the meeting today. So the point is, you know, just to re-summarize, that those red error bars are kind of going up and then kind of staying still, or, you know, plateauing. That might be exactly the same thing what would happen if I were to sort of hindcast everything in blue into smaller data sets.
And what would you say success would look like? Like, are you going to be satisfied long term with? And by the way, I don't have any agenda or stakes in this, but I'm just curious. You know, do most people concur if you say that 55% of accounting for 55% of the variance is enough, or do people want to see more? And what do you need to make predictions?
That's a great question. I think that's also partly answered by the community in terms of, you know, I mean, we have to take a lot of machine learning, like tutorials, textbooks are looking at data sets of tens of thousands of data points, and they're expecting correlation coefficients of like 0.9 and better. We're working in the environmental science realm where, you know, variabilities are much higher. And, you know, I'm an oceanographer by training. I've seen papers reporting, correlations much lower and still considered significant and publishable. So I think it's very much set by the context of our community.
Great, thank you for that.
Just add a couple of little tidbits as well. Part of what's going on in that jump to the blue is there's the normalization. There's also, we found a way to include some really extreme biogeochemical hotspots that are, and basically what that means is when we incubate the sediments, they consume oxygen literally within seconds. And they're extremely fast. And we honestly struggle with those to understand how to deal with them analytically and technically and statistically. And so we have made some advances in being able to handle those samples. And there's two things going on in normalization, and including these like super extreme hotspots actually improve the model, which really surprised me. It's pretty exciting. So it's the really like hotspots of the nation, if you will. And when we get those in there, we're actually doing a lot better in terms of our model performance, which is, I think, pretty striking.
We need a new name for extreme hotspots, something that sounds really cool. Thank you, guys.
So, yeah, thanks, John. BK, I think you're next up.
Hi, thank you. Well, this is a really great. Thank you for this old update. Actually, along with the hotspot and also the statistical outlier, that's all associated with the questions. So, you guys working on this big scale, like huge spatial distribution in United States wise. But have you looking for what's within one system, how much heterogeneity could happening? For example, even if you look at one river system, you can find particular location can be hotspot, which is statistical outlier with all the measurement, and that drive hold the trend that drawing up from it. And I guess this is something I know. So I see that fire enhancement, that component can be one level to it. So have you looked at to this, see that any one system and see how much heterogeneity within one system versus the huge scale of this, what you guys compare? Any sort of there's just norm to see much bigger scale variation with the variation with sample collected large area, spatial distribution versus within system.
Yeah, I'll try to take that one. So our within system, this is, and that's why I went to this slide, is this Yakima River Basin. And so this is where we're studying from headwaters down to main stem across multiple biomes and multiple different kind of land use characteristics. It's a pretty diverse basin. And so you can see the variation here. We're going from almost rates that are almost not measurable, close to zero, to let's say about 50 or 55 milligrams of oxygen per liter per hour. And so that's at least, and this is just one basin, right? But but to put it in context, the rates across the entire CONUS are getting up to orders of around 3,000 milligrams of oxygen per liter per hour. And so this one system is actually a very small slice. Even though it's a very diverse system, it's a very small slice of the entire CONUS distribution. And we will be pursuing additional work within this particular basin to understand within basin drivers and patterns and dynamics, and to put that in context in a multi-scale way of what are those drivers, how do they compare to what we're seeing across the entire CONUS. So this is set up in this kind of at least two-scale approach. And I personally, I think it'd be really quite interesting and I think important to try to replicate this sort of within basin, within stream network sampling and characterization with the kind of the CONUS wide. To do that's pretty difficult, and just from a logistical and resource perspective. But I think it'd be a good direction to go if we can pull that off.
Yeah, so particularly this project, I was wondering about the resolutions, the sampling, like a location-wise, how close the location of sampling and to see how you handle that. So whether AI, what's the resolution of area the AI can cover, like grid or something you can call?
The sites that are being made, where we're making predictions at with the machine learning model. So the model is on a point-by-point basis. So I need a latitude, longitude, and a couple other data, and that allows to make a respiration rate prediction. So it's not the spatial resolution is not necessarily set by the machine learning itself. It's set by the data that is available to the machine learning. And the data points that are sent that were on the map that Bree displays, those are roughly about 30 meters. Those, because that's based on a global database that I have access to of stream networks. And so that would be the maximum resolution I would be able to use when trying to make sort of a uniform broadcast across the whole continental US.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. And then another piece of modeling here that we haven't talked about yet is using the machine learning models, the data directly, but also the machine learning models to inform and use them as inputs to mechanistic models that are simulating hydrogeochemistry within the river corridor. So there's two examples of that. One in the Yakima River Basin again, where our team led by Xingyan Chen, what they're working on is trying to implement spatially variable rate parameters for aerobic respiration using the machine learning model outputs as inputs to that mechanistic model. Because that model is simulating the hydrogeochemistry across the entire basin. And so that's using, I think the spatial resolution there is going to be based off of, I believe, actually, no, I'm not actually sure what the spatial resolution is. I shouldn't just guess. But that's more of a spatially pretty continuous model across the stream network. And then the other example is Jesus Gomez Velez, who's at Oak Ridge National Lab now. He is taking these data and using them to help inform and evaluate a CONUS-wide model of sediment respiration rates that's using NHD data. So in case, and so the spatial resolution there is the resolution of those flow lines from NHD, which I believe vary from place to place, but I think are on the order of, you know, hundreds of meters is kind of the scale at which each sort of segment is run. And so there are efforts to go from point data to more spatially continuous data at basin and continental scales. If that helps answer. So I got two more hands up and then hopefully get to a feedback session. Becca, please.
I think on some level you answered my question, but I guess I was interested in this kind of the role of mechanistic modeling and kind of the, like the relative strengths of machine AI modeling and then like mechanistic modeling. Is like this machine learning going to make mechanistic modeling obsolete eventually? Like, I don't know, I guess just kind of a broad sense of how those two approaches work together or displace each other, or yeah.
Yeah, I'll just start real quick and hand this to Stefan to provide some thoughts as well. So to be candid, that's not my personal technical space, so I don't want to speak too in detail. What I'm seeing is a lot of development and interest in hybrid modeling, where we can leverage the strengths of both machine learning and mechanistic modeling together to try to get best of both worlds. And so what I'm seeing is not a displacement at all, but a partnership that enhances understanding and predictive capacity better than either could do on their own. So that's my quick answer. Stefan, do you have other thoughts on that?
The only thing I wanted to add is basically to bolster that, to say that machine learning typically runs really fast. So it's easy to make iterative tests and really try things out, whereas the mechanistic models can be much heavier weight. So, and that's why the hybrid approach is really valuable for science.
Okay, thank you. Ming, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. This is my first time involved in this, but I found it's really cool. Glad I'm involved. I have two quick questions and one science question. Quick question is about, I'm teaching a hydrology course. I really want to invite you guys to give a guest lecture and maybe request a more set a test toolkit to show students how to do fieldwork. So whom I should contact for that purpose? It will be in the fall semester.
I can get in touch with you about that.
Okay, thank you, Bray. Second question is about the data. I went to the ESS dive site and found several zip files. I didn't open it, but I thought it could be a little bit, the data could be a little bit complicated. Is there a way you could provide a tutorial to explain the data structure? And it could be pretty easy, but I just thought it could be complicated. It's just a thought. It probably help people to understand data better, and so we can make a better use of data. But just a suggestion.
Yeah, super appreciate that. Bree, do you want to provide any thoughts on kind of tutorial and that sort of idea?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we could do if people are interested. If you were to download that zip file, we do include a lot of metadata, and that includes how to navigate like what's in the data package, and what we have descriptions of every single column header and every single file within that, and that's called the DD for data dictionary. It's the column headers, and FLMD for file level metadata that lists all the files.
Yeah, I will explore the data. Thank you, Bree. And a science question. So how does the AI select the sites of sampling? And I was thinking, let me give you a little bit more context for this question. So when I did the sampling, in the morning, it rained just cats and dogs. And then we wait until it's clear. I went to the site. I really doubt if that's the data you need, because the rainfall can affect a lot of things. And another thought is if the sampler know the principle of site selection, and the sampler could use their knowledge to make some evaluation. They could say, oh, this is probably not the best site. It could be somewhere nearby. So if we know the principle of AI used for site selection, that'd be helpful. Yeah, but then what's the principle? If any conceptual ideas?
Yeah, thank you. Stefan, do you want to hit on that?
Sure, absolutely. So there's two parameters that go into defining a metric for how we select sites. The first one is the error estimate that was generated as part of the machine learning model, where we say this particular site we make a prediction at, but we also have an error there. And so we would think that we would want to prioritize sites where we have large errors, because that would then help on the next round of training when those sites get included to help reduce errors in the future. The second indicator that we include is how different that site is from all the other sites that we have in the database. Because there the philosophy is one of trying to cover the bases as much as possible. And so those two are weighted equally together in a single metric.
I see. But the processes, like biogeochemical processes, are not explicitly addressed in the criteria.
That is correct.
I see.
We also allow collaborators to propose sites, and at which we do make predictions to see sort of in advance what could be the difference between sites.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. And there any papers we could read to get back? I have a personal interest, research interest on this site selection. So is there any paper you could share?
Nothing is published yet, but the paper that with that QR code where we want to write the manuscript is part of that.
Okay, so I will join that meeting. Thank you. That's
Wonderful.
all my questions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, super appreciate those questions and feedback.
Yep.
Yijun? You're muted still.
Sorry.
There you go.
Thank you, first of all, for all presenters. And I have a quick question about the modeling aspect. Have you seen any trend in respiration with stream order? So like you have the least variability in respiration in some certain streams, but a large variation in other streams. So have you seen a trend?
I haven't looked at that myself. That's a wonderful question, though.
Yeah,
And we
because
could explore it.
because there is a certain theory in variability prediction in terms of string order. So as we move from headwards to higher order streams, probably variability declines. Yeah, I just wonder if you have seen such trend. And another thing is, do you have string channel geometry? Any information about the string channel geometry information included in your database? Like the width, depth, average width, that is a sampling location.
Yes, I'm using the River Atlas database, which tells me like it treats each reach as a segment. So there's nothing within each segment. I've got an average depth and a width and an average predicted climatological flow rate.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for all the questions and feedback. So we just have a few minutes left. So we won't have tons of time to do this. What I'm going to encourage people to do is to go, I'm going to try to change the way I'm sharing my screen at the moment. Okay, so this link right here, can't see the chat. Oh no, never mind.
I put it in the chat.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Always on the ball. Okay, what that is this is a way to collect feedback where let's have a couple questions and you can upvote and downvote. And you can also put in your own response. I'll show you how that works. You can also reverse. You can like change your response from up to down or just take it off. And also before we go there, there's a YouTube channel. So this should be, yeah, that's a live link. So the link to the slides are in the chat and these are live. This is a live link to the WHONDRS YouTube channel. If you want to go look at this, the recording again, share it with your friends and colleagues, it'd be much appreciated. And so if you go to that link, this is Poll Everywhere. You should get to a screen that looks like this, hopefully. Someone shout if it's not happening. So, okay, great, this is already happening. So you can go through here, and here's the question at the top. We talked about this next very immediate kind of tangible step is this open crowdsourced manuscript on this project. So we want to know, how can we make this most valuable to everyone? What can we do to make this to help? So we pre-populated some answers here. Recurring update meetings, clear governance, develop scripts openly, engagement during storyboard and ideation phase. I would encourage folks to upvote or downvote based off of what you think would be most helpful. You can also put in your own response here. And we were testing this out. I think Stefan put this in here. I'll just do it again. You can say, oh, you know, coffee's pretty important. Submit, and it'll show up, and then everyone else can upvote and downvote. So take a cut. We'll just do this for, I don't know, another 30 seconds or something like that. And we'll just this is a way for us, of course, to get your feedback, and then we'll pause for a moment and see if anyone wants to voice something about their opinion of what's most critical. And we won't get through all of them. We have another, I think, 4 questions. So maybe we'll get to one more. I'll just wait till it kind of stabilizes. Actually, no, I'll just do this. As people are putting in their responses, does anyone want to voice their opinion? If you're thinking about the science we're talking about, okay, let's do a manuscript together. What's the number one thing on your mind? How can that work well? Or what would make it work poorly? That's also useful to know. Anyone want to unmute and just share their perspective? Okay. And as I said, feel free to put any kind of response, just type it in, and that's a nice way to gather feedback as well. Okay, seeing some other responses here. Groups, I think are sub-teams, seeing that. Okay. Seeing governance, getting together, being open. Clear leadership team helps takes the chaos 50. Yes. Thank you, Peyton, for throwing that in. Yeah, we've done this a few times now of doing open manuscripts, and it's a journey every time. It's generally enjoyable. There are times where there is some chaos, but yeah, I hear you that having strong and clear leadership is quite important. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Feel free to unmute and say a few words as I do this. It just takes a moment of logistics. You'll watch me do this. So the next question we wanted to ask is, and this should automatically show you this screen now. Shout if people aren't seeing this. So we talked a little bit about this plan to shift focus. Okay, we've been doing this, the current approach for about a year. As I mentioned, we'll go till mid-October. We think the model's kind of stabilizing, and we're going to shift to kind of focusing, not kind of, very directly focusing on fire impacts. What are people's thoughts? Like, is this a good idea? Or maybe there's a better idea? Throw it in there. If you see something, oh, there's a better opportunity, go in a different direction. Oh, thanks, Christoph, for throwing that in the chat as well. So, okay, I'm seeing some feedback. Time series could be important. If people have questions about this part, also just unmute and ask right now. Okay, event-based sampling I'm seeing. Nice. And as people are putting their responses in, we have just like 30 seconds left. So I'll just say a couple other details about this. Is the idea is to select sites that that have experienced a fire within the last year, to try to like constrain it that way, and that have experienced a significant hydrologic connectivity event since that fire. So you can imagine, landscape burns, but if there's nothing to connect it to the stream, well, probably not going to see any effect. And we're really focusing, well, there's two things. We're focused on the sediments as hopefully a more integrative part of the system that may be less, may fluctuate less dynamically, possibly, but also go after the river water itself and the respiration going on there. Yeah, thank you for continuing to throw feedback in here. Seeing a lot of useful stuff. So, and Bree has a result from earlier poll. You can see it in the chat. Open science, great. Rivers, great. Machine learning understanding is kind of in the middle, sort of to be expected. And you can have a look at how people feel on a river when they think about their emotions and personal state and what that looks like from a river perspective. So I can see a distribution there too. That's very fun. Okay, well, we are at time. I would love to keep talking to you all, and I'd really encourage you to reach out to us. There was a email address right here, wonders@pnnl.gov is a good one. You can email us at icons if you like. You can email Bree directly. There's many emails to go out to use. So thank you very much for joining today. Thank you for your participation. And please, yeah, sign up for this manuscript effort. We really would love a big, rich community to come contribute to that. That makes the science better. It makes it more fun. Even if it's a little bit of chaos and getting 50 or 60 authors going in the same direction, it's still a really cool journey. So appreciate you all so much, and hope to talk to you and see you all sometime soon. Take care.